So, good afternoon. So today we're going to talk about uses of AI at the Ontario Parliament, and in particular, two projects that we're working on. One is using generative AI for transcriptions, and also potential uses of AI at the legislative research branch. As I mentioned, the agenda, giving a little bit of background and talking specifically about those two projects. In terms of generative AI, I mean, like, this is something that I'm sure you're familiar. It's been something that it's been fast growing and continue to grow almost on a daily basis. Many of the Canadian parliaments are using or exploring uses of this technology. In particular, British Columbia and Ottawa are already using it, especially for House transcriptions. And we have been exploring AI transcription and see how can we make it fit to our organization. In the past, we tried with ASR, automatic speech recognition software, but the results were not all that great. But however, since the advent of generative AI, the results have improved significantly. At the Legislative Assembly of Ontario, our transcriptions, we call it Hansard. I understand that perhaps this name changes from region to region, but basically what Hansard is a substantially verbatim transcription, and that is because there are changes done, additions to remove repeated words, perhaps correct conjugation of verbs and things like that. So it's not an exact transcription, but for the most part, it reflects what's been said. We publish daily, and we have been doing this since 1974, and it's used by members, researchers, and other professionals. During the day, we produce what is called the draft Hansard. This is like a slightly less edited version, a little bit more raw, but the idea is to provide early visibility to some of these transcripts. And all these transcripts today are being done manually, and they are produced at the end of the day and then posted on our internet. The process is basically, today we have about 30 staff that work in different three main categories. We have transcribers, editors, and publisher, that they look at the different stages of the production of this document. Although they work in sequence, not necessarily that one full sequence has to be completed for the other one to start. The audios are segmented in small segments of 5 minutes, then transcribes, those then get passed to editing, and so on and so on. And at the end, all those little nuggets of information gets compiled and assembled into what becomes the final document. Just to give you a sense of the effort, for 1 hour of proceeding, it's today taking on average 15.5 hours person hours, right? And 9 hours of transcription, 4 of editing, and 2.5 for publishing. So when we look at this, clearly we see an opportunity here. Like the 9 hours of transcription is somebody manually basically typing or retyping what is being heard or produced by closed caption. Certainly a great area of opportunity, and we focus on what could we do. Other challenges that we face is like, well, the deadline. We have to publish the final report by 9 p.m. That same night. There are times where there's a section of introduction of visitors, which is very demanding, mainly because they use proper names, and those are hard to transcribe or pronounce sometimes. And again, there's a demand to produce these reports faster and faster every time, to the point that for a full Hansard, it takes between 95 to 100 man-hours per day, which is a significant effort. Closed caption is not all that reliable, less than 50%. And it's unfortunate because we have this great material being produced, but in terms of reviewability of this material, there's not much we can. It's unstructured. The focus today is on the presentation of the document, but there's not a lot of reusability and searchability, although we do go through a process of applying some tagging mechanism for some of the major topics. But we believe that that could be a lot better, and we felt that perhaps generative AI could help with that. So once we knew that, we embarked in a rather ambitious goal, and this is something that's still going. The idea was to provide a complete unedited version of Hansard. Could we? I mean, the challenge was, could we have something that it was completely, I would say, computer generated with a delay of 15 minutes? So a document that basically it gets produced through the day and could be consulted and checked, and it will be reflecting what is being said up to 15 minutes prior, and completed after 2 hours of the sessions completed. Clearly, if we can achieve that, we would create a number of efficiencies for Hansard, predictability in the process, because regardless of the length of the session, we would always know that those days would stay, or those times would stay consistent. We would also have consistency amongst committees and other work that also have to be transcribed, but in periods of busy activities, they suffer because clearly the House proceedings take priority. We would like to improve the document structure for reusability and searchability, and the ability to link to videos from the document. So by generating by computer, we can perhaps do timestamps and whatnot, that it will be better suited for video linkages. So we started with the prototype, leveraging, of course, the audios from our AV systems, and using some basic metadata from mics that as active mic activation. We're using OpenAI, Whisper OpenAI. We're getting an average of about 90% accuracy. We are doing several passes just to guarantee or increase the accuracy. There are times where the first pass, the tool might render it as not, I guess, not fully sure about, or with not a high degree of confidence. So we flag that in yellow, and then subsequently passes through the same. If the text happens to match to the previous, then it changes the color, rendering of a higher degree of confidence on that. And the other thing that we use, and this was interesting, we didn't think about it, the initial work, of course, we were getting almost like a wall of text, right? Everything coming right after, and there was no proper paragraphs and separations to make it more appealing to the eye to read. So we fetched that through ChatGPT, and ChatGPT does a pretty good job in formatting the document. So it's really not adding anything other than helping us separate a paragraph and whatnot. And we did opt for not training the model, simply because at this point, going from 90 to 91, it would require a larger investment than what it took us from 0 to 90. Several obstacles along the way, learning stuff, as you can imagine, our learning curve for our staff, sorry. And also we have to prove a business case. It was a high bar, and we're working on that. The other thing is there's a little bit of hype around AI, and we went from like a few years ago, nothing could be done on AI, and today the feeling that everything can be done with AI. And reality is probably somewhere in the middle, right? So we have to find what are those boundaries, and what is realistic, and what is perhaps a little bit optimistic, I would say. We also have to change the culture that today there is a focus on perfection with the introduction of delays, perhaps to give path to something that is adequate for reading, but perhaps but much faster. In terms of technical issues that we encounter, identification of speakers, it was a challenge. We have to use mic's activation to tell us who was talking. Periods of silence led to issues. I mean, the actual tool kind of waking up and asking, "Are you still there?" or things like that. And we were able to. We have to remove all the silence periods from the audio. Proper nouns, as I mentioned, they are hard. The French language detection, it turned to be a problem. We are a parliament that at any point, any member can change languages, even mid through their presentation, right? And the tool had to detect that and make the appropriate changes. And crosstalk interjections is the areas clearly that have more problems. When we have long periods of somebody speaking, those things tend to be very, very accurate, but question periods and the likes are a little bit more challenging. Excuse me. How do we resolve those issues? Dedicated team for development, working with senior management to make sure that there's an understanding of what can be done, and basically bridging that ideal from reality, setting out expectations from quality, using microphones, as I mentioned before, to help with the accuracy, removing the silence, and align timestamps to reduce missing text. In terms of for ourselves, potential next steps is we think that at the assembly we have 3 potential products: the draft answer, so something that is rather fresh off the oven, excuse me, with no completely generated by the computer. But also taking that and feeding into the actual document, and we feel that basically replacing all that transcriber type of thing and focus more on the editing, right? So we have a tool that it does, if it does a 90% accurate job, we could use it and just focus on editing that document, as well as using it for all our committees. We're in terms of things that we're exploring the possibility of perhaps starting training the tool for accuracy. The idea of providing some controlled vocabulary. We have some Native American type names and proper names that are constantly using geographical, regional names, and constituency offices and things like that could certainly be loaded into the tool that will facilitate the use and the spelling of those, and certainly adding new libraries for the French detection that it will help us. Lessons learned, it was very good up to around 90%, and at that point you really hit a point where it's very, very hard to make improvements past that point, and to the point that it diminishing returns becomes really expensive for the marginal gains that you get. Speaker identification is challenging. Sometimes we face that there were delays on the activation of mics, and that caused bleeding of text from one speaker to the other, the last sentence assigned to the previous speaker or vice versa. We did a post-processing to add basic formatting, the one that I was talking about, adding ChatGPT. We have to work fairly close to turn French language to make sure that it would be activated properly. And this is something that I think that since we started the project, we saw the tool evolving as we were going. So we can only think that this is a technology that's continued to evolve, and it's going to become better and better. So certainly we see great potential for this. I just wanted to show this. This is a 30-second clip, just to illustrate, and clearly that this is not expected or intended to be read, but how the tool works. And at the bottom, you see a section that it's in yellow, and you would see as the speaker goes through, the text start to scrolling and some of that yellow disappearing, meaning that it went through a second pass, and at that point consider that that was reliable enough to be considered part of the document. So let me see if this works. So we saw that the yellow disappeared and a slightly crossed. So the idea is that our goal is to have a document that is being built at the time of the speeches are delivered. Okay. Next step, and that is for that our first project in terms of using generative AI for transcriptions. The second part of the presentation deals with the use of generative AI on our legislative research. A little bit about our legislative research. I'm not sure if all legislative offices have this branch. This is a nonpartisan branch that provides in-house research for the parliamentarians. The service is confidential, and it allows, and it's clear, nonpartisan, as I mentioned, it's requested by the members or committees or staff, member staff, to help them elaborate initial projects or bills. We have 15 people in the group that with various areas of expertise from law, economics, political science, planning, and whatnot. And the research is supported for the members and the constituency offices and parliamentary committees. In terms of what they, as part of the research, what they've seen in the past is some of the uses of AI in parliamentary system. The main areas that we've seen use for is classification, bill drafting and amendments, transcription and translation, and that speaks about one of the projects, the one that I just presented. We've seen some use of chatbots and user support. The other potential use is for public engagements, helping perhaps providing language, more plain language for some of the bills, for easier consumption for the general public. And clearly on the cybersecurity and application development, this is an area in the IT department that it's heavily used today, speeding up the process of application development and filtering potential threats on cybersecurity. This group has was formed in 2019, and about last year, towards the end of 2023, the group basically decided to kick off a little bit of research project of their own about the potential use of generative AI for the purpose specifically of parliamentary research. The guidelines that they set up for themselves is they would use hypothetical prompts to make sure that no material used previously, by any of the members could be exposed. A client's query were not input in the AI applications. So these are queries that were actually made up just to make sure that they was completely separate from the work that the department does. And of course, none of the results were disseminated to the clients as actual responses. The working group looked at different categories, including generation of text, visual, audio, legal, and academic research. The type of things that they look for the general text box, possible use cases, they concentrate on the summarization of documents as a way of aiding the research, or potential help on the early brainstorming of the research process in terms of perhaps identifying sources where they can then subsequently research could concentrate and whatnot. From a visual generation, they look at generated images that could be included as part of the research to complement the material, to professional material, perhaps make it more appealing, produce data visualizations, graphical charts and whatnot, and embedded some design tools that could help with the editing. Audio generation, the same thing, try to generate audio versions of the research, perhaps for easier consumption by the members. And also they looked at legal and academic research, things like summarization of legislation, case law, jurisdictional research, and the likes. And these are the results. And from, I guess, higher applicability to lower, green, and starting at the top. When I talk about relevance, is the relevance of that particular usage specifically for research, parliamentary research purposes. When we talk about performance, this is more of a quality metrics, indicating like it performed well for that purpose, or low in the same manner. So for the first one, which is the document summarization, is highly relevant for research, and the results were very good. And this is one of the things that is consistent with the use of generative AI in principle, because for research, one of the things is you need to know that the information that you're receiving is accurate and whatnot. Summarization of documents, because you serve the documents to the engine, so you know that your results are going to be constrained to that. So from the get-go, you have validation of the resources, and that's what makes it highly usable, because it does a very good job understanding those documents and drawing conclusions without perhaps drawing or inferring biases or not from other non-intended sources. Visual generation. It deals with embedded tools that could aid the design, and this is about the creation of charts and imaging that could, I guess, pictorially describe some of the research. The relevance, it wasn't as high, but again, it performed really well, and again, high degree of accuracy, because again, it's a controlled unknown input. Therefore, your output is highly relevant. Academic research and legal research both are of medium relevance. Academic research was performed very well, very high, focusing on the specific tools that they deal only with those academic resources, and it was good to stay contained with that in that environment. As far as the legal search, it was a little bit less performant and again, I have to emphasize, for research, it was I guess, inferring, perhaps running into issues with jurisdictional laws and whatnot, that made it not as relevant as we would like. And the last three categories, they were medium to low. Those are visual generation of images, and this is just generating an image to illustrate perhaps the main topics of the research. What we found that the quality was not great, because it's kind of fun to try to, through process, generate images but there are mistakes made, and they render images that and because of the nature, an image is when something is wrong, it's very evident, different than perhaps a text that doesn't that hides it a little bit better. Same thing for chat box. For the purpose of research, they did not perform well. They seem to repeat themselves or wander around, but they didn't find that it was something that could help it advance their research. Similar with audio generation, although the quality was okay, but we didn't find that it would be relevant as far as a form of consumption for the material, and they still feel that the printed or electronic version of the research would be more easy to consume. So in terms of the next steps, clearly they identified there's potential opportunity to gain efficiency here. So they are going to continue to work with AI agents, for example, Copilot, but we're not restricted to that. I mean, like, we're not promoting anyone in particular, it's just naming one. The goal is to understand and see if we can enhance and augment the throughput of the group. We believe that those tools, with some training, both the tool training and the user training, could help enhance and advance the adoption of AI. The pilot will examine different AI agents, will generate the materials independently, and then we'll compare and see. One thing it's important for research, as you can imagine, is to identify your sources. So they will focus on those that they produce links, perhaps, to the source document. We want to see if they're sufficiently accurate for early drafts of the written research. We identify and understand that we don't expect that they're going to do the research for us, but is that something that can say, okay, well, give me an idea? And from that point, certainly it seems like an accelerator for the research. We want to see if we can provide some control of what materials to be included, and that this is a little bit of the bigger challenge type of thing, especially for those agents that they're a little bit more of a black box, because for research it's clear to identify some resources are trusted resources, other ones less so type of thing, and it's important to keep the integrity of that and produce genuine productivity gains much faster as part of this with using the tool. At the assembly, one thing we did, and this is because we need it for our people, we decided to come up with some guidelines in terms of how to use AI. We felt that it would be hard to create policies around AI, mainly because the speed that the tool is evolving, but at least create awareness, so people, before they use it, they go through a thought process and, okay, well, first of all, don't use just any application. Understand what you're using. Confirm that the application is being cleared by your technology department, and make sure you evaluate you have the tools to evaluate the output. Don't assume for a minute that just because it comes from an AI is either right or this is what I should be using. Similar, every time you get something out, you have to put something in. Be careful about the information that you are presenting or submitted as part of your prompts, because especially if you provide sensitive information, and it does take some practice to get use of how to word those prompts to get the most of or to improve the results. As always, you have to validate. You cannot abdicate responsibility of the actual report. Ensure that the material that comes out is aligned with the standards of your organization. Disclaim that this has been produced by AI, and always be aware of the risk of plagiarism, copyright infringements, and the likes. Because just because it's generated by AI doesn't mean that it's free or has not been copyrighted or from somebody else. Final conclusions: it is dangerous to assume the AI is a research tool. It has to be used with care. It is good to consider use it for authoritative material. But you have to remember that these predictions are based on relationships on the language itself. So they could be mistakes. Excuse me. I think that some people still believe that it works just like a Google search, and completely different. Google search are based on exact matches, and over the years has evolved that to the point that we learn to trust almost blindly the research, the source of the results from a search like that. AI hasn't reached that, and just because it's produced by the tool, by no means that it's accurate or realistic. In trained hands, clearly it's an accelerator, and it has the potential to enhance productivity, but it's not magic. We have to maintain professional accountability, and this is one of the most important things we talk amongst ourselves. This group has over the years built some trust as a legislative research about the material that they produce. Certainly, you can not outsource your credibility just because of the tool. So use it with that perspective, but ultimately, the quality of the material, you have to keep all your same standards that we use as if you would have written the document yourself. Staff training, key on this. And certainly, we will continue to look for tools like this, especially we hope that the industry moves towards more open, disclaimer on how that information is acquired and whatnot, and move away from the early, more of black box type of AI engines that you don't necessarily know where things are coming from. And with that, I conclude my presentations.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you. Sorry. Thank you so much for that informative presentation. Hansard is very dear to my heart. So I've been, my first sort of ever role in Parliament was actually back in 2005, so 20 years ago, specifically for Hansard. So it's one of those things I've seen evolve over the last 20 years, and especially with the current implementations and whatnot, it's a really fascinating journey to actually have seen, what it was, what it has sort of evolved, especially like it's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. And I think with modern society, we now live stream, and we have broadcasting, and we might be streaming this directly onto YouTube or another broadcasting platform as an example. And one of the sort of trends we've seen is the disconnect now between, well, we're seeing something live on like a video on demand system or a live system, and then you have your transcript, and obviously accuracy and the content and the curation of Hansard is obviously still an important aspect, but it's the speed of delivery, as you sort of said. And I found it fascinating when you broke it down into 1 hour of proceedings actually equates to potentially 15 person hours of effort. And I think it's that disconnect between, the actual, like, say, a live stream and people, like, sometimes I've seen it in question time where, members of Parliament are rewinding the live stream to see what another person has said, because they can't actually access it, via the Hansard transcript in a more live fashion as you're sort of describing. And so it is a fascinating, I think, sequence or a disconnect between, or a challenge, I suppose would be probably the right word, between the curated version of a transcript and the accessibility of it. And your statement around, I think there has to be some sort of medium in between where we're delivering a high quality output, but we're also delivering in the interim a draft of something which is presentable, reasonable, and accurate too. It's a really interesting concept, and I love how you're sort of going through that process in terms of like the yellow, and then you put a few passes through it, and then it will eventually become like a normal color, as an example, to say that actually this is a high confidence in terms of what this actually is meaning, which is really good. I've always find it interesting, especially around bilingual parliaments. So you've got English and French. There's obviously some unique challenges around dual transcription as an example. So I'm assuming you would probably publish both in English and in French. Is that a correct assumption?
Yeah, the actual published document has to be in both languages. The challenge that we have is on the English Hansard, let's say it has to be all English. So the tool was what was doing earlier. It was identifying French and it was trying to translate in French. So we were with a product that it was a mix of English and French. And we had to kind of tune it to the point that it says, no, understand it, it's English, it's French, but start doing translation. So it was doing two things, right? Capturing the audio and doing the translation, because in the end, it has to be produced as a single language to be then translated in full to the other language.
And I suppose that would introduce an interesting challenge, wouldn't it? Because I suppose during the actual proceeding, some people might speak in English, some people might speak in French, but they have to be two separate products at the end of the day. And have you, obviously, through the use of generative AI and artificial intelligence, etc., have you found, obviously, that you can actually achieve those sort of results in terms of, having something, as you sort of said, just in English and just in French, even though people are swapping those languages quite consistently over a period of time?
Yes, I mean, like, this is open up a whole new, I mean, like, the whole assembly is looking at, could we do this, could we do that type of thing. Wow. So the first thing we do is, like, we're still looking, so can we produce the single one? But also at the same time, because that was part of the problem, is like this document has to then be translated immediately after type of thing, right? So can we have a process that generates in one language and then somehow that fits to another engine that translates to the other language? So somehow both are, that would be the ultimate goal. And I'm getting ambitious now to have both documents generated multi-language at the same time.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting. Like, I know that you were sort of mentioning around text summarization and document summarization and those sort of aspects as well. I think, and I think that's another sort of area as well where we can, analyze a document, but also give the option where we can actually present that summarization into English and into French or another language as an example at the same time. And I think another sort of really interesting use case that we've found as well is around the document summarization in the committee process. So in committees where you're absorbing a lot of information from the public or the public engagement side of things, like, what are your thoughts in terms of the use of, say, artificial intelligence within, like, public submissions or public, citizen interaction as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, those things we find that as in general, the more you can control the inputs, the higher the accuracy you get in the results, right? In document summarization and the likes is a perfect example, because I give them something and it's able, like, the engine works really well trying to connect those and make sense out of those documents, staying within the boundaries of I guess sets of documents provided. So that's one area that we're very hopeful. We're in the early stages, as I said, mainly for research, but highly accurate. And from a research perspective, is a great I guess accelerator, I would say, because it's before they had to consume all these resources and then draw conclusions. For them now, they can have the engine skim those, and with those they narrow down what are the publications or resources that perhaps they want to dive in. So from a research perspective, it is changing their worlds for sure.
Yeah, amazing. The other sort of thing, like, which sort of really resonated with me as well was your comment around search engines and chatbots and prompt engineering as an example. And I think especially, like, with my sort of own experience as well, and I'm keen to sort of get your thoughts around this as in terms of what your sort of experience has been in terms of your staff and a range of other things with using generative AI, is that I think there's still definitely that paradigm shift in terms of, we've all sort of really used to ways of trying to tune Google searches and, and I think people don't really realize that it's actually a very much a paradigm shift in terms of what I call a traditional free text search to the use of it within an AI context. And I think what I sort of try to say is context is king, the more context you can give an AI tool, as you sort of said, the more dots it can join and the better output you can actually give around that as well. What are some of your sort of strategies in terms of user training and how you've sort of had to tackle that sort of whole paradigm shift in terms of, using an AI tool is a different way of thinking in some respects to your traditional just type in, what is the weather today? You know what I mean? Or something like, simple into Google as an example.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, this is an ongoing exercise and ever learning type of thing, right? But as you said, on a typical search, and that's the difference that people had to mentally make. A Google search, it was, I'm looking for this particular. I don't need to give you a context. Just do either you find it or you don't. Or Google would infer with high degree of accuracy. You have to say you probably meant this. In generative AI, as you said, context is king, right? It's trying to identify, define. If I'm this person, if I'm looking for this, if I'm in this environment, and all those things that can perhaps position yourself and additional information to AI to try to narrow the search, right? But it is I think it requires practice and whatnot type of thing. And the main difference is that, right? In Google, the same prompt will give you the same results. In some of AI, it might not, or it will not, and that's why you have to frame it and perhaps and go through several iterations, right? Just kind of okay, give me this. Also, okay, taking this output and then do this, resubmit your query and try to refine it that way.
Yeah, this is really valuable tips, I think, for everyone listening as well. And it's it's sort of, I also find, especially with parliamentary context as well, sometimes they'll look at a large language model or like ChatGPT or Claude as an example, and they'll say they'll upload, 100 documents into there and just expect it magically to work. And I think that's sort of I think the conversation, or the slide or the dot point you had around, there's still a lot of hype around AI. But I still think there's a long way to go in terms of that training experience or the actual understanding of exactly how that works. And I know that there's been a lot of parliaments out there who will upload, and a 1,000 page, here's all my procedures of the house, or and literally expect it to work absolute magic in terms of that. Then they'll say, how do I lodge a question, or you know what I mean, and it's sort of just expecting to get a sensible answer without the context in terms of a 1,000-page document as an example. So I suppose those sort of and it's one of those sort of things where we go and also look at it what's your sort of thought process in terms of obviously the training aspect of a change management aspect as well with Hansard. Obviously the efficiency gain, I think, how have you gone about sort of describing the efficiency gains within the Hansard context to staff as well, which might be concerned about the use of AI around that?
Yeah, no, and it is a challenge, and these are topics that they have to be handled with real care, because you're right. I mean, for some people that this could be perceived as a threat, right? If I was a recorder and all I did is type away, and they'll often say, plug this and it's going to be doing whatever you do it faster and whatnot. So we are very careful how we introduce these tools. We're looking at making sure we involve them along the process, making sure they understand that perhaps this is not a loose replacement of your job. It's an enhancing your job, perhaps allowing you. What we're trying to do is train those people to say, okay, well, could you focus perhaps more on the editing part or tagging this document. So as you go through, rather than typing, as you read, start tagging the document, so it becomes a little bit more rich in terms of attributes, and furthermore helps us with any subsequent either data structures or searches or the likes type of thing. So that is a great point that you bring up, because it's the human element of AI type of thing, right? And we have to make sure that people see it as a tool and not necessarily as a threat that could perhaps take away, right? So it is a sensitive issue.
Yeah, it really is. And I think the way which I sort of look at it is that we can get people focusing on high value tasks, as you sort of said, like the editing of the content, the enrichment of the content, instead of actually what I call the low level tasks around, well, they're like literally they've got the headphones in or using Dragon or, repeating what they're hearing in there, so we're removing that sort of what I call the remedial tasks. And I know within parliamentary context, there's been a lot of, sometimes you have to duplicate all this work everywhere across Parliament, because one sort of department will use the same data, then another person will create that same data set, etc. So you might have about 3 data sets from one output, as an example, because people are just used to copy paste, or they've got to now put it into this document over here. And there's actually a lot of what I call manual overhead, which could be streamlined so people could focus on what I call the high value tasks around tagging of information, classification of information, and a range of other things, which can really benefit the whole organization as a whole. And also, I think it sort of also resonated with me as well is that one of your last sort of slides as well, you said like the use of AI, especially in a legislative and parliamentary context, has to be trustworthy, has to be accurate, and that's the key, is because people rely on Parliament to have those sort of senses. And I think if we can ensure that, as I said, like the use of AI as a business tool, we can get people to focus on accuracy, transparency, and accountability, rather than the actual content generation side of things as well. So what are your thoughts around that?
Oh, no, absolutely. And you're absolutely right. The thing is that people have to understand, this is still, it's a tool. And by no means you can make sure that the tool doesn't compromise perhaps your reputation. And as such, what we find is like there's no harm on creating early drafts of research material and whatnot. But as you said, still great focus on the review and what we said, and we put on our guidelines, right? It's still, no matter what you do, it's ultimately always your responsibility, and you cannot abdicate that. You cannot say, okay, well, it was wrong because it was AI. It's still you producing the document. It would be like me blaming Excel because my formulas are wrong, type of thing, right? So it's like saying no. It is still a tool, and it's still the member or the researcher, owner and author of that material.
I think that's a really, really good point. I think I've sort of always advocated that it's a supplement to your work, not a replacement for your work, if that makes sense. So, and I always say to even of my staff or of the parliaments I've worked with as well, is that, you still have to understand what you're generating, or you still have to actually have the skills to, and I think this is again the human element of AI, is that you can't get complacent with, for example, just expecting it to just be correct, or expecting it to actually generate you exactly what you think you want it to do, because again, context is really, really significant in terms of joining all the dots together and ensuring that the the content that you're about to produce is actually correct. And I think we've had these sort of conversations sort of with other sort of like Clark and, you know, a range of other things as well. Like, for example, the procedures of Parliament, or, you know, precedents or anything along those lines, is that, you know, you could ask, oh, well, what should I do in this circumstance if you're on the floor of the chamber? And you could look back in all your databases and you can use, some really interesting things. But what they've also said to me is that, well, it might give me this advice, but I still need the human element to actually then be applied to whether that actually is a right decision at that time, you know. And that's where it gets really interesting from my point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. And just and exactly, we have been doing some of that. I mean, like, as you know, we have this database of previous rulings and whatnot that are constantly, and we thought about, like, okay, well, how about AI? We ask them, and we have all that information. And so far, the results, they have not been accurate to the point that we can trust that. And that's because, and again, like anything, right? There's a good use and not so much, right? In this case, for example, it requires high accuracy, because you're saying, okay, it's a previous ruling, so you have to make sure. You can't say, I think somebody said something.
It might be, yeah.
Exactly. So we have to be exactly precise, and we haven't achieved it. Now we're near close that confidence level on that.
Amazing. Well, I think Louis sort of giving us the hint that we've got sort of at our time, but I've really enjoyed our conversation and your presentation as well. Said Hansard and you know, AI are very dear to my heart, and I think you're doing some amazing work in that area, and I look forward to having more discussions with you.